This talk is about how malicious actors depend on your unknowns and how you're going to disappoint them. What is an unknown? It's something you don't know is in your network, is in your environment, right? It's basically the snake in the grass that can bite you. So we're going to talk primarily about wireless threats, and then we're going to talk about how to deal with wireless unknowns, because when I mention wireless, what's the first thing you think about? Wi-Fi, right? Okay, Wi-Fi is 1/4 of the equation. And if all you're doing is Wi-Fi, you've got a giant gap in your security. And then we'll talk about cloud and OT and IoT. And oh, by the way, I've got some recorded hacking demos that you might want to be interested in. So, a little bit about me. My name is Joseph Salazar. Yes, I'm a CISSP and a CEH. CISSP since 2009. CEH since version 5. So I'm an old CEH. This is when they still just use Xerox copies for the manuals. I was in the Army, retired after 22 years. I was primarily in counterintelligence, and then got my commission, became a military intelligence officer, so I did it the right way. I went green to gold, and then I was a cybersecurity officer for the last 8 years of my career. Again, I was a cybersecurity practitioner, both civilian and military side, doing computer forensics, incident response, a lot of incident response, and just general cybersecurity, primarily strategic network defense. And then 8 years ago, I went to the dark side and became a vendor. So let's talk about wireless unknowns. We wish our network looked like this. It's very simple, right? You have endpoint, you have network. So you only have to worry about monitoring your endpoint and monitoring your network. Who thinks their network is like this? All right, because this is the reality. You've got a ton of unmonitored devices, whether it's vendor equipment that phones home on its own channel. And the reason I say that is because we've actually run into vendor equipment that had a Zigbee console you can connect to from the parking lot. Shadow IT equipment, you know, I'm being helpful. I'm going to set this up so that we've got better coverage in our area for Wi-Fi. Industrial controls, OT or IoT or XIoT or industrial IoT, who has smart thermostats in the rooms, in their offices, right? That's an IoT device. That talks on the network. You see that list, that big giant jumbo? Those are all the protocols that could exist in your environment right now. Who knows what MQQT is? Or LoRa? Or -7? Those are IoT protocols that are probably in your environment. And then, of course, you've got folks that come in and they were working and, hey, my network is bad in my side, so I'm going to bring a cellular modem hotspot. Who here has wireless earbuds, truly wireless earbuds, like AirPods and stuff like that? How many times have you brought them into a conference room and realized you were having really sensitive discussions? Right? Do you know those devices could be used as listening devices? We've run into situations where somebody accidentally left a Bluetooth earbud on the conference room desk and was recording it on his desk at home and down the hall. So when we talk about wireless, we like to talk about it 3 ways. You have ubiquity. Wireless is everywhere. Our CTO recently estimated there are approximately 60 billion wireless devices, and that's growing. Look at the stats. This is just IoT devices that are expected to grow. We're talking billions, right? And wireless signals are everywhere. Who here right now has a phone? Smartwatch? Wireless device? Wireless glucose monitor? Bluetooth-enabled hearing aid? Right? Those signals are everywhere, and they communicate using the electromagnetic spectrum. They travel at the speed of light. They ignore walls, and they ignore guards, guns, and gates. So your wireless is a huge attack surface. The next part we're talking about is invisibility. Anyone know what a mantis shrimp is? Okay, mantis shrimp is one of the coolest animals ever. They look like a mantis. They live underwater. They look like a shrimp, but they're neither. And they have these 2 clubs that can accelerate at up to 50 miles per hour in less than 1/10 of a second. They accelerate so fast that it causes cavitation, will actually cause light to show up, and they are so strong that they will break through a shell of their primary prey. And the reason I bring that up is because they have the most sophisticated eyes in the entire animal kingdom. We do not. Mantis shrimp have 16 cones. We have 3. The visible light spectrum is what we can see. We can't see beyond that. Wireless signals operate at such a low frequency that we can't see it without special equipment. And so all of those ones and zeros, all that binary data flowing through us on wireless signals is going by and through us. And then vulnerability, it's the third thing. Prior to last year, there were approximately 2,800 wireless vulnerabilities in the CEV database. Last year, they added 716. That's a 25% increase in 1 year, right? So wireless is everywhere. We can't see it, we can't touch it, and it's vulnerable. So what kind of wireless threats are we talking about? Well, here's some common wireless tactics, and we'll talk about this. Initial access, command and control, data exfiltration. Who still thinks about audio and video surveillance? Yeah, that still happens. Espionage still happens. Common approaches. We're going to talk about all of these. I have examples of all of these, but we're talking about evil twin attacks, hotspot and cellular data exfiltration, Bluetooth data streaming, dual home devices. Who here has a laptop that they plug in and forget to turn off Wi-Fi? That's a dual home device. Keystroke injection, and a lot more. And some of the impacts can be really bad. Data compromise or manipulation. If I change a digit in a financial report, would you notice? Right? Denial of service. Yes, you can deny service to things like the thermostat or the coolers that are responsible for your data center servers. Physical system compromise. Financial theft. Happens all the time. And then the consequences. Not only can you lose money, you can impact your brand, you can lose the trust of your customers and partners. Oh, and by the way, there's these things called fines if you lose data that is regulated, like healthcare or financial data. So let's talk about some really fun things about remote code execution. Every single one of these devices I can buy right now. You know what, everyone know what a rubber ducky is? The Wi-Fi duck is the Wi-Fi version of that duck, of that rubber ducky. USB Ninja cable, anyone know what that is? Okay, that's Bluetooth. OMG cable, that's Wi-Fi. That is the X-ray of the head of a OMG cable. That has a Wi-Fi antenna and transmitter in it. That has a Wi-Fi chip in it, the size of a USB-A case. Now, every single one of these things is low enough in cost that I can use it to load malicious code onto a device, either wireless, and all of these I can do it wirelessly. Matter of fact, we found a USB Ninja cable at a customer on the conference room of an executive briefing area. It was an executive floor. For those of you who know what the CIA is, right, they call it like level 7. It was something like that for a commercial customer. So you want to see what a USB Ninja hack looks like? So this is a phone. Notice that the RSSI value is changing, right? The RSSI is a received signal strength indicator. As soon as someone plugs in their cable, I've connected. I have configured 2 payloads. The first payload is literally this simple. I can configure as many payloads as I want. I sent the first payload. It's actually rather innocuous. I'm just going to open Windows Update. Now, the second one was actually going to open up a web page. Now, if I was malicious, I could have made that a drive-by download. I could have made it a watering hole. I could have had malicious code loaded from that web page. In this case, it's just loading our website. You can fit 3 dozen different exploits and different exploit code, and all they have to do is plug in that cable, and I can inject it onto that system. Evil twin attacks. So evil twin attacks are really common. Karma is actually a really special form because this is the first one that actually attacked the client based off of their configuration, not the access point. So the way Karma works is that each client has what's called a preferred network list, or P&L. Have you ever saved a Wi-Fi network onto your laptop or your phone? It's saved to your P&L. And that P&L, what that does is it constantly looks for those networks. You just keep sending out a probe every so often, says, hey, are you in range? Because if you're in range, I'm going to connect. So what the evil twin does is, what the Karma attack does is every time it gets a request, it responds with the exact P&L entry. I'm Starbucks. You're looking for Starbucks? I'm Starbucks. Come connect to me. So the client connects and gets captured. And now I can do a man-in-the-middle attack. Now, that's just one way. There's another way. You've got credential theft, right? So here's where, this is what would be considered traditional evil twin, where you impersonate a target network to steal credentials. And it's not as hard as you think. So $120 gets me a Wi-Fi pineapple at Hack5. 125 bucks, 120 bucks, roughly. And it's actually not that cheap. I mean, it's not that expensive, and it's not hard to learn. And there's a bunch of scripts you can load to work with this. In this case, I'm just going to create a capture portal. And anytime, as soon as you try to log on, and I'll show you how I can make somebody log on. As soon as you try to log on, I'm going to present you a splash screen. Hey, you need to log on to the network. Your authentication is expired. Well, if they don't believe me, they're just going to put in something wrong. Well, I'm going to forward that. And if it comes back, I'm going to say, hey, wrong password. Please enter your correct password. OK, now they think it's real. And once they think it's real, now I can capture the credentials. And then I can kick them off, or I can maintain that position and man in the middle of them. You want to see how Evil Twin works? So you've got an attack. You've got a victim that's connected to a corporate network, right? I, as an attacker, am going to set up a Wi-Fi access point with the exact SSID and BSID of that access point. A BSSID is the MAC address. So I'm going to look exactly like that access point. But the victim is still connected, right? So I deauth them. I send, if it's WPA2 or lower, I can deauth anybody by sending a deauth packet. And because I'm emitting a signal that is stronger than that access point, they're going to connect to me. Because I can vary the rate of that Wi-Fi pineapple in terms of the signal strength to beyond what the FCC mandates is what's appropriate for an access point. So they're going to connect to me, and now I got them. I can man in the middle of them, do whatever I want. So it's not hard to do these type of attacks, and they're not theoretical. They are not theoretical. About 6 years ago, the GRU, anyone know what the GRU is? It's a replacement for the KGB. The GRU personnel were found in the Netherlands to have that much equipment in their car, attempting to do wireless attacks and surveillance on a target. That was in 2018. They had to be close enough, and they were using a Yagi antenna so they could get far enough away so they weren't in too much danger. They actually got pulled over because of a traffic stop. In October of 2 years ago, a drone was found on a financial institution with a Wi-Fi pineapple on top of it, and it had successfully stolen credentials and penetrated the network. A drone. As a matter of fact, you can download plans to 3D print your own drone cage, and all you have to do is add motors to a Wi-Fi pineapple, and you can make your own Wi-Fi pineapple drone. It's freely available on Thingiverse. So this is showing that, and this is all consumer off-the-shelf Wi-Fi pineapple. They just bought it, right? And so as you see, attackers are getting farther and farther away. They don't have to be as close anymore. So let's look at some attacks that have happened. So that one was a financial services institution. There were actually 2 drones that they found. The first one had a laptop on it, and it crashed because it was too unwieldy. The second one, they found it because they noticed a duplicate MAC address on their network. And then, of course, you have the Bluetooth hack that could allow me to steal your Tesla. This was essentially, I would just run the exploit, clone the token from your Bluetooth phone, add it to my phone, and I can take your Tesla or your BMW. But even better, why do that when you can just wait for them to go and charge? So a bunch of researchers set up an Evil Twin at a Tesla charging station. And they captured credentials. What they would do is they would log on to that account, add their phone as an authorized key, and now they could steal that Tesla. Who here has AirPods? They were vulnerable until about a few months ago to Bluetooth attacks where I could hack and activate the microphone and listen in on your conversations. But the one that really scared a lot of people is this one. It's called the nearest neighbor attack. For the first time, somebody was able to hack a victim from 6,000 miles away using Wi-Fi. Here's how they did it. So about Thanksgiving last year, the company that was investigating this, Volexity, published their blog on their findings. So Gruesome Larch, or APT28, or Fancy Bear, the naming conventions depends on the vendor, had successfully infiltrated Organization A using a multi-stage attack. First thing they did was they bought a bunch of credentials and they tested it against an employee portal that was visible to the public. They validated a bunch of them, but they failed to log in because that portal had MFA. Good for them. So they went ahead and hacked Organization B, which was across the street, because they knew that that Wi-Fi was in range. And I'll show how they did that in a second. And so they compromised the VPN device, and they moved around until they found a dual home device, a laptop that was plugged into a LAN and had their Wi-Fi active. And they used that device to connect to Organization A's Wi-Fi, which, by the way, took the exact same credentials, but did not have MFA. Then they lost access to B. So what they do? They attacked C and used that to access B, to access A, and then eventually went straight from C to A. You know how long they did this for? How long these persisted on that network? 2 years. 2 years. And this was a Russian APT. So how do they know? Well, anyone ever go war driving? It's kind of time-consuming, right? Not anymore. This is wiggle.net. This is a crowdsourced war driving dream come true. 1.5 billion Wi-Fi networks all over the world, geolocated. You can look up by address. That's the San Francisco Bay Area, by the way, because that's Golden Gate Park, that's Twin Peaks, that's San Francisco. Look at all of the Wi-Fi access points that are available. Oh, and by the way, they activate this, they update this often, but once a year they do a war drive-a-thon. Every DEF CON, they do a war drive-a-thon, so people update it. This is so up-to-date, I can actually look up my address and see all my neighbors' Wi-Fis. So that's how they do, you could do this. You no longer have to war drive, you just look up wiggle.net. So as Brian Krebs said when this came out, your network perimeter probably just got a little bit wider. So how do you manage this stuff? Who here is familiar with wireless airspace defense? If you read Gartner, they released a report early last year, and they haven't said anything about it since. But wireless airspace defense really is meant to monitor, detect, and protect your wireless, right? It's everything that you are supposed to be looking at from a wireless perspective. And as I said, if you're just looking at Wi-Fi, you're only looking at a part of the problem, because this is supposed to cover Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, including Bluetooth Low Energy, cellular, and IoT devices, right? Like Zigbee. Who has Zigbee devices? I have a Zigbee device. It runs my, my front door so that when my ring turns on, the light turns on. When my ring activates, my porch light turns on. That's a Zigbee device. And it's meant to safeguard your sensitive data and prevent access, right? Who here currently has a WIDS solution, wireless IDS? Wow. So here's the thing. Anyone here work in government or have government contracts? All right, that's a requirement now. According to ODNI, and if you work for Department of Defense, SecDef, the OSD, they released a memo, and there's a bunch of now wireless IDS is now a requirement in any classified space. So, according to Dan Ayub and Lawrence Pingree, who has since left Gartner for the 3rd time, he tends to go and become a CISO and then comes back. Current solutions don't adequately address wireless. So anything you have right now doesn't really handle wireless very well. You might be doing wireless NAC, but that's just a really small part of the puzzle. How do you detect when a device shows up that clones a MAC address? So wireless airspace defense, these are the challenges that it's attempting to address. First part, more IoT devices and wearables. You know your watches can make phone calls? They have SIM slots now, right? Think about how many IoT devices and wireless and wearables are now in the business, in your environment, in your network, right? Because those are targets for an attacker. What about unauthorized rogue devices? That Wi-Fi access point that got deployed by somebody like me who was a pen tester. When I walked into a conference room, plugged in a laptop into an unused port behind a cabinet with a Wi-Fi access point that I could connect to from outside and completely bypass their network. Right? Unauthorized devices. The fact that wireless is invisible, we've already gone through this. Just understand, you have no way of detecting it. And wireless goes a long way. Complex multi-protocol environments. Like I said, you probably have at least Wi-Fi, at least version 6, Bluetooth, maybe Bluetooth Low Energy, definitely cellular. That's all just currently in your environment. Not to mention the 2 or 3 dozen IoT protocols that are floating around that you have no idea about. Anyone know what an out-of-band or side-channel attack is? So when you go through one way to bypass security, and you can use that side channel to exfiltrate data. All right, if you have multi-antenna devices like your laptop, which has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, I can use one channel to access your account, your system, and use a separate channel to exfiltrate data. Who here has BYOD in their office? Bring your own phone. How many of you have been forced to put MDM on it? Exactly. Uncontrolled devices in your network perimeter. Anyone know what Pegasus is? Pegasus is a really famous mobile phone spyware that somehow the attackers got, because it was only supposed to be sold to penetration testers. Go figure. So think about that. And then, of course, you have legal compliance risks. If you're in a regulated industry, insurance, finance, healthcare, or you do business in the EU, you have regulations that control what you're supposed to do in case of a data breach. And if you have a wireless data breach, they have wireless requirements in those regulations. And if you're not fulfilling them, you're out of compliance. And that means you can get sued, and you can be liable for any loss of data. So here's some example threats, right? We've covered these. But you can see all the different ways that I, as an attacker, can exploit wireless in your environment. So I'm going to tell you the 10 things that a solution should offer. Not every solution offers these, but try to get as many as you can, and don't worry, they'll be quick. First of all, you want visibility into the spectrum you care about. Probably up to at least Wi-Fi 7, right? From all the way down below to, I don't know, 100 megahertz, right? You want to be able to identify those threats quickly and respond to them. You shouldn't have to be, you shouldn't have to wait a while to get a fix on a wireless device that's rogue in your environment. Location. Location, location, location. Anyone here ever use a Yellow Jacket or a Yorkie Pro or something like that? We call it a finishing tool to locate a wireless device, right? They're a pain in the ass. You gotta physically triangulate it based on direction and signal strength. And they're not easy. A solution should make it easier. Forensics. You should be able to get as much data outside of payload as you possibly can, because a lot of these channels are encrypted. So you should at least be able to get good metadata, right? At least to be able to identify the type of device and that kind of stuff. You should be able to enforce policy and show compliance, right? This is the legal side of it. You need a way for that tool to help you out with the legal side. And then from an operational perspective, you've got to be able to integrate it with your environment, with your existing security tools, because it's useless if it's such a silo. It's got to be easy, and it's got to be fast. You shouldn't need a PhD in RF theory to understand the output. You shouldn't have to have been a signals intelligence analyst to locate a device in your enterprise. Want to see what one looks like? So let's go back to our USB Ninja cable example. So this is the Bastille interface. That's your floor plan. You're going to see we're going to plug in that Ninja cable. And within about 6 seconds, as soon as it's plugged in and has power, it's going to show up on your floor map, the exact position, within 1 to 3 meters. Right now, it's beaconing, because that's the first thing a Bluetooth device does when it gets power, is it beacons. Well, I know what it is. It's using BLE. There's the MAC address, because right now it doesn't have a name, so we're using the MAC address. Now, it's advertising. So now it's going to give up vendor info. Oh, it's a USB Ninja using BLE. Anyone know what the distance is for BLE? I'll explain it in a second. BLE. Okay, so now the Android app and on the phone and the cable have paired. So now you're seeing the pair. And we're actually the only one that can do this. We own the patent on this. We can show you both sides of a Bluetooth pair after pairing. We're the only ones who can do that. The reason I bring up Bluetooth Low Energy is, anyone know what the spec says Bluetooth Low Energy distance is? Anyone know? Okay, the standard Bluetooth spec says 100 meters. As a Bluetooth 5, it's 1 kilometer. So I can be a kilometer away in ideal conditions, or in non-ideal conditions, I can be 500 meters away and connect to your device with Bluetooth Low Energy. Isn't that scary? I could be in the parking lot. You plug in this device, and I've owned you. Oops. And, oh, hold on. There we go. Let's see an evil twin. Yes, we can detect evil twins. And this was actually really cool, because here we're getting some detections that it's an evil twin attack, right? So we've got evil twin, we've got duplicate device, we've got an unauthorized pineapple in the environment. And I'm going to pause it right here because I want to point out a few things. Hopefully you can see this. There are, how many MAC addresses do you see here? There are 2, but there are 3 of them, right? The first 2, top line is running on 5 gigahertz. Bottom line is running on 2.4. Notice the MAC addresses. They're identical across the 3, so this MAC address has been cloned. Notice the encryption and the authentication. Those are the real ones, are the far, my right, your left. Those are the real ones because they have TKIP and they have AES. The middle 2, the other 2 don't. If you notice, one is open, and the other is PSK, but open, which means you can connect, but you have unencrypted communications. That's the Wi-Fi pineapple. Isn't that cool? So now you can identify an evil twin. Oh, and by the way, we can also identify nearest neighbor. We can identify if, at least some tools, right, and Bastille is one of them, can identify if a transmission is coming from outside your perimeter. That's kind of cool. And then we're giving you all the data, all of the metadata that we collect. We collect approximately 150 bits of metadata, which is a lot, right? Everything from signal strength to all that stuff. So now I've shown you a bit of the stuff on the wireless side. Let's go talk about cloud. Now cloud, everyone sort of understands, right? You understand cloud, right? But do you understand your unknowns in the cloud? Who here can honestly say they know everything about their cloud environment? You'd be lying. So let's look at some cloud risks. First of all, shadow IT. This is a problem everywhere. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and set up my own application because it fits my needs. All right? That can be a compliance violation. That can leak data. So you need something to tell you when it's been deployed. So that's something like a CASB solution to monitor and control your app usage in the cloud. Right? If you don't have a CASB solution right now, you should probably start looking at it if you're in the cloud. If you run a cloud environment. If you're in a cloud environment. And you want to make sure that IT approves everything that shows up in your cloud environment. Second part is unknown data exposure. If you accidentally save PII to the cloud and it's not protected, that's a violation, right? Especially even PHI, that's even worse, right? Especially if it's not encrypted or you don't have the appropriate access controls. Data leakage happens like this all the time. Who remembers when people are accidentally publishing Git code with hard-coded encryption keys in them, right? It happens. So put up DLP. DLP will fix this as long as you're doing appropriate classification, and you better have encryption at rest and in transit, because encryption fixes a lot of these problems. Misconfigured cloud settings. Who remembers a span of about 5 or 7 years, maybe 10 years ago, when every single data leak was because of a misconfigured S3 bucket? Remember that? All of that data being leaked out. This is what happens. It's like you create open storage buckets without the appropriate access controls. Even worse is over-permissive identities. According to Amazon, AWS, 95% of people use only 2 to 3% of the permissions they're given in a cloud environment. 2 to 3%. So they're either extremely overprivileged or they're underutilizing the applications they've been assigned to. But most of the time, when you're doing IAM, you assign a person to a group, and that group has a set of permissions. Are they supposed to have all those permissions? Not necessarily, but a lot of places don't have that granular control, right? Imagine if I, as an attacker, gain access to somebody with, say, Microsoft Graph. Anyone know what Microsoft Graph is? That's a permission in Azure. So Microsoft Graph gives you access, even if you don't have it, gives you direct access to the SQL Server backend. And all that it's supposed to do is allow you to graph data. But in order to do that, it requires back-end permission to SQL. A lot of people, all of these overlapping permissions, I think at last count there's 17,000 permissions you can get in AWS, and about 15,000 you can get on Azure. Google Cloud, I think last I heard was about 12,000, probably more now. So, CSPM, and good cloud identity management. At least do some sort of role-based access, and at least review it every now and then, right? This is one of the hardest things you can do in a cloud environment is give the proper permissions. One of the products that we used to sell at my old company would map every single overlapping permission and then show you the effective permission they had. You can actually do this with Bloodhound. Anyone remember Bloodhound? 6 degrees to domain admin? Bloodhound does this. The enterprise version of Bloodhound does this. We'll show you all the overlapping permissions that are in your environment, and I believe they have a version for cloud. I haven't looked recently. I identified third-party risks. Everyone uses APIs in the cloud. Everyone uses SaaS. If you're using Microsoft Office, you're using SaaS. If you're using back-end connections, congratulations, you've got Microsoft Office APIs accessing your back-end in your cloud. And some of those are vulnerable, right? And you may not know it. They may not know it. Do you know every single third-party vendor's last risk assessment or their last vulnerability assessment? You don't know that. You better. You should at least ask for those security assessments from your third parties. When was your last risk assessment? When was your last security assessment? When was your last vulnerability scan on your APIs that are accessing my cloud? Right? Make sure that you're doing proper API security. Monitor external connections, that whole thing. So let's do some cloud hacking. This is cool. So Git T, if you don't know, is a personal version of Git. You can load it up on AWS. Now, I created this login and password. So this is Mike Lowry. Anyone know who Mike Lowry is? He was a character from Bad Boys. Because there's the Bad Boys 4 script. Now I'm going to go into Kali. Now remember, I don't have admin. I'm just a regular user. I'm actually going to go and look to see if there is a vulnerability for Git T. And this is an easy lookup. So I'm going to set the R host as that host, right? That's the R host. I'm going to set my username as the username I know, and the password as the password I know as a regular user. So I'm going to check it. Oh, yes, it's vulnerable because it's 1.16.0. It's vulnerable. So now I'm going to set my local host, which is my local laptop. I'm going to set the URI as the Git T URI. This is all the information that I've been able to gather just off of that. And then I just type in exploit, and I'm done. That easy. All right, I've got shell. I've got a reverse TCP connection. I've got shell. You know what I could do with this? There's so many things I can do with this. But so let's do some examples here, okay? So there's my host name. Who am I? I'm Git. I am Git. I am no longer Mike Lowry. I'm Git. So let's go to the root directory. Let's go ahead and point the user as Git T. And now I've got access to the databases. Now it runs SQL in the back end, so I'm accessing it. I'm going to pull the email addresses and then the hashes, and I'm going to offline crack those, and now I'm going to have admin. How easy was that? How long do you think it would take me with rainbow tables to crack that hash? Not that long. Well, but really not that long. I used to have a rainbow table when I was doing forensics. One of the instructors at NK spent 3.5 months running permutations to build a rainbow table that was approximately 1.5 terabytes big for every password containing up to 15 characters with letters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and special characters. 1.5 terabytes. Now, that'll crack in what, 20 minutes? Even just the lookup? The lookup itself will take maybe 5. All right, let's continue with some cloud risks. Unknown. Oh, who here uses serverless or who uses containers? You know what the problem is with serverless? Is they disappear. You know how hard it is to do forensics on serverless containers? On serverless functions or containers? It's impossible. I should know, I tried. I was a forensic guy. It's a pain. It also makes it really hard to track vulnerable code. Because I, as an attacker, if I get access to your container, I can run vulnerable code, use that to gain access to the back end, and I've broken shell. I've broken containment. So, use container security solutions. Figure out a way to secure a container environment, right? And then look for abnormal behavior. Because, frankly, unauthorized code is not going to behave the way you expect it to behave in a container. And that's going to have a profile or a signature or UEBA of some sort. Insider threat. This is always a problem in security. This is the hardest problem to fix, right? If I, as an attacker, if I, as a disgruntled employee, decide to set up my own S3 bucket, upload a bunch of IP, and then have somebody access it because I leave that S3 bucket wide open, there's nothing you can do about it if you don't know where to look. So know where to look. Implement UEBA. Implement and enforce strict access policies and log every piece of user activity you can. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt to go through, but at least outliers will show up, right? People have patterns of behavior. If they start acting outside of that pattern of behavior, that's one of the indicators of an insider threat, is patterns of behavior that deviate from their normal behavior. Who here runs in more than one cloud environment? Azure and GCP, or Azure and AWS. Yes, a lot of organizations do. And if you don't have visibility into every single one of those cloud assets, you're going to have issues, at the very least, with compliance, and if not, with security. So figure out how you're going to do your consolidated inventory across all of your disparate cloud environments. Anyone do hybrid cloud, where half of it is private and the other half is up? Right? Okay, wireless threats. I'm going to show you an example in just a second. If there are wireless devices in your data center, wouldn't you want to know about it? Right? Because it's a pain. And this happens a lot. Okay, you've got a technician that's coming in to do maintenance. They don't want to have to go through the TSA pat-down to get into the data center, right? So they set up a wireless access point and they just remote from the parking lot, right? How would you know that? So put in wireless airspace defense, at least detect when that stuff is happening in your environment. Here's a real-world example. So a large financial company installed us, and in the first month we were in there, we detected big, sexy networks. That was the name of the access point that walked in through the door, and then a server connected to it for an average of 62 minutes as that device walked around that data center floor. When that device left, the server continued to look for it for about 5-10 minutes, which means that it was configured to connect to that device every time it walked through the door. Now, imagine how much data you can exfiltrate in 62 minutes. How much storage does your typical phone have? Let's say best case scenario, 512, right? That's like the high end, you get 512. And then if you get a Samsung phone, you can put in a terabyte or 2 terabyte SSD card. Now, how much storage does that phone have? Enough to pull off any data you want in 62 minutes, right? So, OT. This is the really cool stuff. We get to hack robots. So, OT risks. Who here has OT or IoT in their environment? Everyone should be raising their hand. You have IoT in your environment. Guarantee it. Physical threats. Yes, physical threats still happen, particularly in OT, right? When you're dealing with ICS or SCADA, if you're in a critical infrastructure environment, physical threats. Yes, there is a reason they're air-gapped, they're behind locked doors, or they're behind barbed wire fences. There's a reason for that. So that is at least from the SCADA side. From the IoT side, what if I decide to load faulty firmware? I'll show you that in a second. So you want physical security controls. Surveillance, gates, guards, and guns, if you do have to go to the guns part. Hardware tampering detection, so you know that someone tampered with that firmware. Lateral movement between OT and IT. Who doesn't think this happens? All right. Over the past 5-7 years, there's been a convergence of IT and OT environments. Actually, it probably goes back about 15 years now. Where in order to make life easier for the administrators, they started connecting their OT and IT. That used to be the DMZ. No OT environment was supposed to touch IT. There was an air gap there for a reason, because a lot of OT and IoT is critical infrastructure, right? But now, because of cloud edge computing and all that other stuff, you need that lateral connection between your IT and OT networks. And well, here's the problem. I, as an attacker, can get onto your IT network, pivot to your OT network, and your OT network is not going to have the same controls that your IT network has. I once did a pen test where I connected to a printer, loaded my scanning tool on that printer, and had it scan and enumerate the entire network from the printer, because the printer was running embedded XP. It had a full stack. X-ray machines. Did you know that X-ray machines still run XP? That's why a bunch of them went down when we had that big giant worm. Was it Stuxnet? No, not Stuxnet. It was not K-Berg. God, there were so many. Was it Eternal Blue? It was the one where they started, it took out a bunch of medical equipment in the UK, and like hospitals were in trouble. Yeah, that's because it was running embedded XP. Imagine what I could do with that, right? Because XP has a full network stack. I can do so much on the OT network to enumerate IT, because that's not monitored very well. We had an X-ray machine from a particular client. An X-ray machine showed up, and it had malware from the factory. So you want to enforce strict IT and OT controls and separation. If you have that connection, you damn well better have lateral movement detection and prevention. You better have firewall rules that prevent IT networks from talking out. You better have NDR. You better have some zero trust network access, so that your IT and OT networks don't mix, even though you can administer them. And if you're going to allow remote access, it better be only from the IT internal network side, not from the cloud, or not from outside. Shadow OT and shadow IoT. Yes, this still happens. This still happens. Hey, I want to monitor that coffee pot. Let me set up a camera. You know, the first webcam was designed so that people knew when to refill the pot, the coffee pot. The very first webcam was live streaming a coffee pot, so the engineers knew when they had to make a new pot of coffee. The very first live stream. If your users are adding IoT devices, and there are a ton of IoT devices you may not be aware of, Ember mugs have Bluetooth. Ember mugs, the mugs that are used to heat your coffee, have Bluetooth. And what did I say the distance was for Bluetooth low energy? 1 kilometer. I can hack your Ember mug and then use that to connect to another device like your laptop, which is sitting next to it, and then bridge that into your wireless network or your wired network, and off I go through your Ember mug. Anyone remember the casino that got hacked through the aquarium? The casino got hacked, their player club information got hacked because their aquarium had Wi-Fi on one of the filters. And they used that to pivot into the IT network and steal player club information. So you want to make sure that you know what every asset is on your environment. Deploy network discovery, asset discovery tools, right? And then, of course, you want network access controls to prevent things from showing up on your network that you don't want to show up on your network. If they can't add that Ember mug, then at least you're doing something right. Unpatched or undiscovered vulnerabilities. This is the cool stuff. So if you have IT or OT or IoT, and you do, or X-IoT or industrial IoT, I don't know how many IoT acronyms they have now, chances are they've been there a while. And that firmware doesn't get updated very often because it's impossible to patch, and it's not like you can put an endpoint client on an IoT device. So they're not protected, right? So if you're not replacing your thermostats that control your room temperature every few years, you have old firmware, and it's probably vulnerable to something. 716 wireless vulnerabilities last year alone, right? And a lot of these IoT devices and OT devices now come with wireless. Hell, I just found out that there's a metal fabrication machine that comes with a wireless access point, so you can connect it to the network, and you can send instructions to it. Metal fabrication. It's stamping metal. And this is at a national lab, because you do custom fab. So, have some sort of vulnerability management program that includes your IoT. If you can't patch it, at least have some virtual patching, or put some compensating controls to prevent them from being exploited. Let's hack a security camera. This is going to shock you about how easy it is. All right, so here's my Kali setup. I'm going to connect to a camera that we set up, right? One of my colleagues set this up. This is just a standard camera. This is Hikvision, by the way. It's readily available on Amazon. Readily available, right? That's the Hikvision front end. You can see that I can just log on to it because, again, this is my camera. It's going to show me my super secure switch, right? It's pointing at nothing in particular, right? It's just my switch. But because it's web enabled, it's going to have network information, right? It has an IP address. But the really important part that you should pay attention to was the URL that I used to get on, right? Because that URL doesn't ever change. You can't change that. That's part of the UI. Hey, so let's go and look at Shodan and see if there's something out there. Well, according to this, according to my Shodan hit, there's 340,000. I'm sorry, 3,400. In the US, there's over 480,000 of these cameras that are accessible on the internet. Let's see if they're vulnerable. I'm going to go check ExploitDB, because why not? Because I'm cheap, and I don't want to work on this myself. Let's look at, for a Hikvision exploit. There are what, 9? I can run through all of those if I wanted to. Let's just pick one at random. It's a Python script. And I'm just going to run this. I'm going to copy this Python script. Did I spend any money on that exploit? No. Did I have to go to the dark web to do it? No. It's on exploit database, ExploitDB. All right, so let's create and go into this directory. Let's run this Python script. Okay, I'm going to check. Is it vulnerable? Okay, so remote is verified, and it is exploitable. So let's go ahead and run this. So remote host is my host, right? That's my system. So let's make a directory. I'm now on. Sorry. Let me go to it real quick. I'm going to show you what we just did. All right, so I'm now on the system. Notice it's running BusyBox. BusyBox is Linux, for those of you who don't know. That's a standard Linux distro. It's meant for embedded systems. It actually runs on the back end of Android. You can run it on Android, right? So BusyBox. So this is Linux. So let's make a directory. Call it bad. Okay, let's list. Did it accept my directory? Yeah. There's the bad directory right here. All right. So now I know that I can create stuff on that camera, on the Linux subsystem of that camera. So let's go ahead and clear and reconnect. So I'm going to reconnect. I'm going to go into the bad directory, and let's go ahead and run TFTP, right? So I'm going to do a remote get to a script called doBad that is on my system and send it up via TFTP to the Hikvision camera. All right, there it is. There's the doBad, and I'm just going to make it global executable. And let's run it. Now, this could have been anything. I could have done anything with this script. So let's download a Shrek video. All right, so I could pull stuff. Can I push stuff? So can we exfiltrate data? All right, let's go into the config. So we're in the config files. I'm going to go and just check the directory listing. Oh, hey, we've got the security certificates. We've got the PEM files. Let's pull them down. So I'm going to do an SCP. I'm just going to grab them, see if it works, right? Again, this is Linux. And I just run an exploit off of ExploitDB. I haven't done any heavy hacking. The hardest thing I've had to do was pick the exploit. Literally. So now I pull down the server certificates. And there they are. Here's the directory. That's my do bad script. And there's the server certificates, the PEM files. Was that hard? So here's the fun part. One of my colleagues worked at a company where they went into a client that had 50,000 surveillance cameras. Anyone know what industry would have 50,000 surveillance cameras? If you say casino, you're right. Now, the problem that they were running into was that their power bill had increased 1,000%. And so part of the investigation revealed that approximately 40,000 cameras were running Bitcoin mining software. So if you don't think this has real-world consequences, 10-fold increase in your power bill. And casinos, come on, they already pay a lot. Imagine having to pay 10 times that amount in 1 month. All right, so, what the heck? Next one, side channel attacks. All right, let's make sure this is the right one. Yeah. Side channel attacks. So yes, wireless matters for OT and IoT as well, right? Just about every IoT device is wireless. It has a wireless radio, right? Very few are direct plug and play. I mean, I have security cameras at home. They're hardwired using PoE, right? Because I don't trust pushing that data into the cloud, because I'm a bit of a paranoid person. The only thing that has cloud access is the Ring, and that's only because the Ring requires it. My IoT devices are on a completely different subnet, purely isolated from the rest of my network, because I'm a security guy and I'm paranoid. But there are things that you can do with OT and IoT, like eavesdropping. You can listen in on conversations. You can jam IoT signals. Remember what Stuxnet did? It changed the parameter for centrifuges, and so they burnt out. So, again, deploy wireless airspace defense. This should be a no-brainer at this point. You should really should be looking at your wireless airspace. Unknown data exfiltration pathways. Yes, IoT can be used to exfiltrate data. And you can't detect it, kind of hard to detect, unless you're making sure that you're not allowing OT and IoT access out past your firewall, right? If you're allowing OT and IoT to access and communicate through your firewall, you've got worse problems, right? But because that stuff should never have to leave your premises. There's no reason for it to be cloud-enabled, and for you as an enterprise to use it cloud-enabled. Build your own cloud and have it point that way if you need to. And then, of course, you want to monitor network traffic, because protocol misuse is a thing, right? One of the ways that espionage agents used to transmit data in the old days was by messing with protocols so that certain bits would flip. And the way they flipped would send encoded messages. Supply chain risks. Anyone know, anyone heard recently about TP-Link? You know what TP-Link is? So TP-Link is a router manufacturer from China. They and about 6 other companies have been banned from importing devices into the United States. You can no longer buy certain brands of cameras, certain brands of networking gear, because they are Chinese and because of the fear that there is a backdoor, right? Who remembers SolarWinds? No one wants another SolarWinds, right? So you better make sure that your supply chain is locked down. Validate, validate, validate. Make sure that the firmware updates aren't bad. And then, last one, compromised credentials. Defaulted weak credentials on IoT devices can create easy targets. And because they're usually in the manual that you can download online, they're easy to guess. This is a real quick hacking demo of an industrial robot. So this is a FNUC robot. This is used commonly, as an IoT device actually. This is used commonly in industrial manufacturing. So we decided we're going to create a routine where it just touches the top of this can. Right? It's a simple routine. Here's the thing though, most people don't realize this. All of these have to be scripted, they're considered IP, and they have to be loaded on every robot. These scripts reside on every single IoT device of this type. Now that is the remote control, that's a pendant, right? But you know that's also networked. So this device is networked. Here's the IP address. I'm going to skip forward real quickly, just because I want to make sure that we get through. So not only does this have an IP address, it has a web server. And that web server is going to give me all the information I need. Here's the version. I don't know if it's vulnerable, but it might be. Right? All of this stuff is available on the web server. Oh, by the way, it runs active programs. Here's the program. There's that can script that touches the top of the can. And here's what it looks like, right? This is X, Y, and Z axis, including rotation. And you noticed that it was set to 250 millimeters downward. So I'm going to go and access the pendant. And that pendant is going to give me a bunch of information. And by the way, I can access the manual for this thing because it's available online. And, oh wait, it has an FTP server. And that FTP server allows anonymous FTP. So you know what I'm going to do? Oh yeah, and by the way, it's on by default. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change that script. So let's go ahead and FTP to it. Great security here. It allows anonymous. I'm going to go look for that can. There's that can script. Let's download it. It's an ASCII file. Let's edit it. So instead of 250 down, 205 down, I'm sorry, I'm going to change it to 305 down. And then save it as can crush. And surely it's not going to upload it. Oh, yes, it does. It allows me to do a remote put. So now I'm going to set it, and there it is, by the way. I'm going to set it to be the default script that runs every time the system reboots. Because that is also set on the pendant. So there, instead of can, I change it to can crush. And now, as soon as the system reboots, it's going to run my script. And I can force it to reboot, by the way, because I have access to the pendant over the wire. So now, here's the thing rebooting. And here's it crushing a can. That's a 10-centimeter difference. That can cripple a supply chain. Imagine if you get onto a manufacturer that creates gears for military equipment, and you change it so that the gear, instead of being shaved down to 25 millimeters, gets shaved down to 12 and a half, or 20. It's going to pass visual inspection, but it's going to break down faster. All of a sudden, you've caused a supply chain issue for the military. And I'm going to leave you with this. Oops. I'm a military guy. I'm retired. Sun Tzu. If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you do not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but you don't know your enemy, you're going to lose about half. If you know neither yourself nor the enemy, you're going to get your butt kicked. Thank you very much. Any questions?